Okay, welcome to Saturday. Today, of course, August 4th, and I want to welcome back to the program two very esteemed guests. Of course, we have retired FBI Special Agent Robyn Gritz and author Andrew Kreig. Both of you, welcome back. Lovely to see you both.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Now, most people may not realize that just last week we had the National Whistleblowers Day, and the thing that I found very surprising is that it goes all the way back to July 30th of 1778, when the Founding Fathers unanimously passed the first whistleblower protection law. And Robyn, you've been speaking to us here on Crowdsource the Truth for months about the struggle that you went through at the FBI as a whistleblower. And you were doing that for years in obscurity before anybody knew about it at all. And it's nice to finally see some of these people who, generally speaking, were unknown to the public at large. We're finally hearing the names of Andrew McCabe and this white male hierarchy within the FBI. You've told us about Carl Gaddis. We see how Peter Strzok acts in this testimony. You, of course, Robyn, were involved in the attempted extraction of Bob Levinson from Iran. We learn now that Peter Strzok and his family seem to have some kind of clandestine history in Iran. I really wanted to get you and Andrew together so we could talk about some of the challenges facing whistleblowers and some of the reforms we hope to achieve so that whistleblowers, Robyn, like you, can be protected rather than persecuted as you have been.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you something. A few of my friends actually attended that conference. Fred Whitehurst, Jane Turner, and we have been in email contact. They were telling me they've been great. They reached out to me, said whatever you need. If you need to vent, if you need any advice, and it just has been nice to get that support. I felt very alone when I first stood up, and when I'll go through what happens to you when you stand up in the FBI, but I felt like I felt so alone. And then after a while, started to meet others. And the big thing that the FBI does do is tries to alienate you, tries to make you think you're a piece of trash. And then you meet other people that they said the same exact stuff about. So I thank Andrew for having this conference. I definitely want to go there next year. And I look forward to working with him. There's a lot of whistleblowers out there, a lot of people that want to whistleblow with all the stuff that's going on in the FBI, but they're afraid of the retaliation. And if we can give them some support, I think we're likely to get more to the truth.
Absolutely. And Andrew, can you tell us a bit about the whistleblower conference that just happened in Washington, D.C. last week?
Well, it was a 2.5-day annual event that occurs each year on Capitol Hill. One of the featured opening day parts of the program was a big lunch in the Senate Dirksen building, in which Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley was a featured speaker. And he told the history of Whistleblower Day going back to the times of the Revolution, as you described. And an individual you mentioned, Robyn, Jane Turner, a whistleblower from the FBI, was one of the moderators of that featured luncheon. I should add that while I'm on the host committee and have been for several years as an investigative reporter and attorney, it's primarily run by others, and with names too numerous to mention, perhaps. But Uh, I'm a close observer and supporter of it, and I've written about it, an overall view of it on the Justice Integrity Project site that I edit.
And we're showing that site right now, of course. This was the event that happened just last week, and the focus was on solutions, of course. The Whistleblower Summit started on Monday, and I apologize, Andrew, that I wasn't covering it there in Washington, D.C. It's difficult to get to all of these things, but of course, people can go to justice-integrity.org, and they can follow Andrew's writing. He's there posting every day, not just about the whistleblower event, but about all things that should concern people. The Russia-Trump probe, the Paul Manafort case that's ongoing. So, Andrew, what would you say was the upshot of this event? Have we moved any closer to the whistleblower protections that we all should be very concerned about? Obviously, when someone like Robyn or Michael McMahon or Michael Dick or Kevin Shipp or anyone within these highly secretive organizations is blowing the whistle on corruption, they are really the first and last line of defense for the people of the United States. We have, in many cases, no idea what's even going on in these agencies, much less the ability to oversee it or curb any corruption. So the role of whistleblowers is so important.
Well, it is. To try to answer your question, it's almost imponderable. It was a successful conference, but it's a small blip on the Washington scene and the overall trends, even with the presence of someone who's very important, like Senator Grassley, chairman of that committee. Ultimately, Jason, I think the answer lies with your listeners and others, because the information is out there. You can have a successful conference, but there are overwhelming incentives for bureaucracies to keep things secret and absorb temporary revelations, but for them to maintain their focus on protecting the bureaucracy and its internal mission. So it's not going to be rhetoric or revelations that win the day. It's going to be an informed and aroused citizenry. And I don't want to talk too long at any one time, but I'll have a little more to say about that. And just to bait the hook or for it, I'll say that even whistleblowers need to be much more informed about how Washington works. And so my perception was that there's a great many earnest, brave, and daring, well-informed whistleblowers out there and present, but some have astonishingly small concept of how Washington really works, even if they've worked in a federal agency.
Well, and that's why you're such a good advocate for whistleblowers, and these events that you're organizing and covering are so important. And people who aren't following Andrew on Twitter can find him at Andrew Kreig. He's written numerous books, including Presidential Puppetry, and Andrew and I have spoken in the past about the JFK assassination and other important topics. So, Andrew, what you're saying is really important. How can the average person who's maybe watching Crowdsource the Truth right now, what can they do once they become more informed? How can we see to it that whistleblowers are protected and not made to feel like their lives are going to be destroyed when they reveal this kind of corruption and come forward?
Well, that's a difficult process, and I'm interested in hearing Robyn's views on that. But to summarize both the perceptions of many of the whistleblowers, and I hosted a dinner at the National Press Club on last Tuesday evening. It's called a Unity Dinner. We brought together about 30 or 40 of the whistleblowers. We went around the room twice so everyone could tell their story to the group and offer solutions on the second round. It's not easy, and fortunately we have some time to maybe get to a couple solutions. I'd like to lay out at some point during this program one suggestion on how to visit members of Congress the right way and the wrong way, in a way that saves people money and gets maximum effectiveness. I've worked in Washington as a lawyer. Some might say as a lobbyist. I would say as a good government advocate. But many people do not know how to efficiently get their stories before members of Congress. And I'd like to share that for about 30 seconds, but
Sure.
Maybe not keep talking continuously here.
Well, I'm ready to bet $1 that the way I've done it is possibly not the recommended way.
I had luck, I guess, on my side. And I still don't understand, how it works, how everything works. But how I started contacting members of Congress, I did try to contact my representatives when I was in Virginia and gotten nowhere. And I was in the middle of losing my home, and I was up at around 2:00 in the morning, and I got pretty pissed off. And I wrote an email to Senator Grassley, because everyone tells me that's who you go to. I detailed my 16-year career as a counterterrorism agent, supervisor, unit chief. I detailed the commendations I had. I sent letters of commendation from General Flynn and Admiral Brian Losey and some others, as well as a brigadier general from Pakistan. And within a day, Grassley's people called me back. So it was a lot of luck, but at the same time, there were two other females that the three of us were trying to get in and explain what's happening to female supervisors, especially GS-15. When she hit the GS-15, you're fair game. So I went there.
What does that mean, Robyn? Why is a GS-15 fair game?
Because you're now in the competition, the higher level executive competition to go into the SES ranks, to take an office, to be an SAC, be a section chief. And there was a New York Times article out that said that it's the amount of females in the SES ranks who head up offices and such has gone down significantly in the last few years. And that was in the New York Times. And then the Inspector General just released a report about the gender inequality in the law enforcement entities under Department of Justice, and they called out the FBI. What I found really interesting, I think we've talked about this, is out of all the criminal investigators, female criminal investigators, agents basically, carry a weapon, 43% had been affected by gender discrimination or harassment. That's a huge amount of people.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I started figuring out, like, how did they start doing this report? Well, back in 2014, when myself and two other females went to speak to Senator Grassley's staff, and we were there for about 6 hours, they were just mouths hitting the ground. Senator Grassley should be general. Senator Grassley wrote a nice letter to his Office of Inspector General and said, I need to know what is going on with these individuals, mostly females, these three females that came to me, and I want to know if this is something that's systemic. He also, Senator Grassley, what was awesome about him is he had a hearing with Director Comey at the time, a couple of weeks later, and I get a phone call from one of his aides and say, can we use your case? And I said, absolutely, throw my name out there. You want me to come testify? I will. But instead, Senator Grassley went off script and confronted Director Comey about the 3 females that came to see him, and he gave examples from our cases. So Senator Grassley's not afraid to take anyone on. He's asked the Inspector General's office to review the circumstances of my case in light of what we know about Annie McCabe, who did the majority of the authorized retaliation and then made my life a living hell. Inspector General's office has refused to take a look at the circumstances of my case because it's an EEO. But then they put this report out on gender inequality, and a couple days later they put out a report on the investigation into someone in the Department of Justice getting harassed and discriminated against. But they won't look at my case, and I'm starting to feel that that's a political thing. And I just want to, it's just something that when you go into DC, I worked in DC for 9 years. I was at FBI headquarters. I was at the Washington field office. There's my old boss, Annie McCabe. We actually were equals at one time. Basically, we worked together in counterterrorism from the time he came to headquarters from New York to the time I resigned from my position, which was the toughest decision I had to make. Another thing that has happened is my case has gained the attention because of Annie McCabe of a couple senators and congressmen. I've been in touch with Congressman Nunez. He's about to start going to bat for me. Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. Actually, I was sitting here on a Monday where I had the day off, and my phone rang, and it was Congressman Ron Johnson. Said, I really want to know your story. How can I help you?
Wow.
And a big thing that helped has been I wrote to Judicial Watch, and Judicial Watch has been fantastic. So I would love to hear about visiting members of Congress, because I do want to set up a trip. I'm in Chicago, so flying back and forth does cost a bit, but I want to be able to set up a trip where I meet as many people as possible and educate as many people as possible on the Hill of why the FBI has no oversight. There's no oversight of the FBI when it comes to whistleblowers or EEO cases.
Right.
Other agencies get to go to the Office of Special Counsel if they're a whistleblower. The FBI doesn't. And I think that's one thing that would help in the solution, would be if the FBI had to answer to Office of Special Counsel. They need to be held accountable. And just one more thing, and then I'll stop. But I did do an interview with Sarah Carter when she was at Circa, and I challenged Director Ray to look at the whistleblower cases, actually to pull the cases, the OPRs, the internal affairs cases, on people who had also had a pending EEO case or a whistleblower case, and to look at those cases, because in my case they broke 24 policies and laws, and I challenged Director Ray to do the right thing and realize the toxic leadership, and I put leadership in quotes, not only went after me, they went after my friend Michael Flynn, and that is coming from inside the FBI. That they well, I know my name is often associated with the F word when Annie McCabe, but as is Michael Flynn. So that's my experience in Washington, D.C., but I worked there, so I'm always trying to meet other whistleblowers and such like that. My concern is to make sure other whistleblowers know they're not alone. And a big thing for me also is to let them know that there's help out there, that they're not alone, and to stop people from possibly taking their lives. I've heard of agents taking their lives because they've been put in my situation. I mean, I was destroyed. So, but a lot of people know my case already. So I just want to say, people have got to become educated, and we have got to hold these agencies accountable. The FBI is running wild with retaliation. It's running wild. It's absolutely, I get calls during the week from 2 or 3 more people that are going through it.
Wow. So it's important, Robyn, because you've been really vocal, and in the past several months I'm pleased that we've been able to get your story out, and for the small part that I've been able to play, I'm really glad you and I were able to come together. And a lot of people do know your story, but we've been adding so many new subscribers. I want people to realize that even though Robyn is looking good and feeling strong right now, she has been financially decimated and is still facing loads of legal charges and has lost her lucrative position at the FBI. So if people are so inclined, they should visit the GoFundMe page. Robyn continues to fight corruption in the FBI and get the word out about how whistleblowers can be helped. Now, Robyn, there's been so much...
Jason?
Yes.
Can I say one thing?
Please.
And this is something I'm going to share with everyone. I mean, I resigned 5 years ago. What is that? It's in about 2 weeks, it's going to be 5 years ago. Legal fees when you're fighting this are astronomical. I used one of my credit cards to put some of my legal fees on. Unfortunately, when I lost my good paying job and couldn't get a job above minimum wage for 2.5 years, thank you, Andy McCabe, I was unable to pay my bills. So to share something that's happening to me right now, which my parents will kill me, but is my wages are garnished because of that credit card.
Oh.
So I don't make enough money to pay my rent right now because they're
Robyn.
garnished to pay that. And, you know, that's also because my case has been ongoing for 6 years with nothing going on. Nothing. Everyone that in my case that targeted me was fired, forced to resign, forced to retire, with the exception of one person. I'm trying to figure out what happened with him. And the FBI, you would think they'd call me and say, you know, we realize that the person that targeted you is a serial liar, but no, they leave us out here. I lost my house that I had built. So I want people to know that when people come forward, and I hear people going, why aren't there more whistleblowers coming forward in the FBI? A lot of them are actually calling me, and then I'm getting the information to the correct people. I was considered by NPR, did an article on me. I was considered a warning shot because I had been highly decorated. I had beat out 150 people to go to a 4-month advanced security studies class in Germany with 43 countries with 141 participants. I beat out 26 people to get the extraterritorial counterterrorism desk at WFO. Wasn't a slacker, but they came after me, actually Andy McCabe, and with the help of a couple guys that I worked with, that they were discriminating against me and doing. Yeah, there's the NPR. Harry Johnson. Now, NPR, just so people know, did about a good year of due diligence investigation of my career and if I was who I was. And it was NPR that said you were the warning shot. And that's sad.
Yeah.
But now people do know that I'm out there and I'm speaking and have called me with good information that, you know, we push forward to the proper entities to ensure they're held accountable.
Yeah. And of course, Robyn, you're a big part of why people know about corruption within the FBI at all, something we're learning about every day. Just yesterday, Judicial Watch told us all that through a FOIA request, they've learned that Christopher Steele was this confidential human source to the FBI. They paid him, redacted, of course, untold sums to create this dossier that was then used to petition the FISA court for a warrant to investigate Michael Flynn and other associates of Donald Trump, who have now been subjected to the same type of lawfare that you have, as you've said.
Yeah. And something that, and I know True Pundit had put this out about almost a year ago, and through my sources, just so you know, Christopher Steele is not new to Bruce or Andy McCabe. Andy McCabe and Bruce Orr were up in the New York area working Eurasian organized crime at the same time. And one of their contacts from foreign partners was Christopher Steele. So it's not a coincidence that Christopher Steele's involved.
Right.
And I find it very odd, the web that has been spun here. McCabe's having a house in Chappaqua, about within a mile of Hillary Clinton's house, within 2 miles of George Soros' house. I think that we need a full special investigative team to really look deeply into what just happened. because
Yeah.
I personally, I only speak about what people tell me, what pretty good access sources tell me, and I just refer it to proper authorities. But yes, Michael Flynn, I'm friends with him and his family, selling a house he's had forever. I feel for his family. People have to realize what the families of whistleblowers go through. And that's where I'm wondering how they will ever make me whole, because they caused health problems for my parents. And it's a shame that it happened.
This is what we're talking about when we say that lives are ruined. And of course, what's happened to Robyn, what's happened to her family, what's happened to Michael Flynn, these are the individuals whose lives are ruined. But let's not forget that people like Robyn, people like Michael Flynn are defending all of us against terrorism. And when we lose that, it's not just the financial resources that the government spends training someone like Robyn or training someone like Michael Flynn. We're talking about a lifelong career, a set of skills and expertise and experience that cannot just be imbued on someone who is 25 or something like that. These are experienced agents who have relationships and capabilities that when we lose that defense, that affects everyone in the United States. Robyn, you've thwarted terrorist incidents that you can't even discuss because they
Yes.
remain classified. But this is such a serious matter that I think, Robyn, history will show that you have been so important and so brave in pointing out the massive corruption within the FBI that, as I said, we're just learning about it more and more every day. It seems like the pieces of this puzzle are being laid out before us. Andrew, you're right there in D.C. What was the response, would you say, to yesterday's revelations by Judicial Watch that Christopher Steele is quite obviously a player in this game who is paid to do these ridiculous things and produce this salacious, unverified, uncorroborated dossier?
Well, he's one of innumerable operatives in Washington on many sides of these issues. Of course, he's based in the UK, but he's familiar to people in Washington. Let me set the scene here just a little bit. The Justice Integrity Project office is on Pennsylvania Avenue, halfway between the Justice Department, between the Congress and the White House. I can look out my window and see the main FBI headquarters, and across the street is the Justice Department headquarters. And all around are offices of consultants, political operatives, and others. So the place is filled with attorneys and other expertise for hire. There's a lot that you've both have said. I will say that going back to your question, though, Jason, more directly, even though I get the materials for Judicial Watch, I attended one of their biggest events about a year ago, and I get about 2 or 3 things a week from them. And I'm immersed in many ways in the Washington scene. It's not as if one can sense immediate reaction to every news development, like you mentioned on Christopher Steele, even though parades constantly go by my office. And one of the things I told the whistleblowers, one of them suggested at the press club, why don't we have a big march in Washington and we'll get whistleblowers from all over the country? And I said, look, I have a parade past my office at least once a week. Nobody pays attention unless you get a good number of people. Right. Stay home, do other things that are effective, including the type of things that Robyn was talking about. I'd like to comment on that just a bit, but first go back to Christopher Steele.
Sure.
And some of these revelations that you mentioned. Um, I'm going to be a little bit disputatious on part of this here and say that uh, because it folds into being effective in Washington. Uh, as a whistleblower or as even as a commentator, uh, in the short run, one is going to get a lot farther by being partisan and as an advocate and aligning with existing political groups and leaving out the rest of the story. Now, the old radio commentator what was his name? Paul Harvey. Um, his broadcasts for decades was now the rest of the story. Well, um, uh, some of these groups, Judicial Watch, I've watched them closely through the years. They're a partisan, pro-Republican, hard-right group under the mantelpiece of supposedly nonpartisan. They're really not. They are picking Republican operatives and causes and keeping that in the background. And in defending Michael Flynn, he's had a outstanding career, but I would just offer before getting back to what I'd suggest as an effective way to deal with Congress. Let me ask our hosts and other guests, if I might, what about the $500,000 that he got from the government of Turkey that he failed to report?
Was it 500,000? I don't even know that. I do know that when I look at it, I honestly don't know much about that. And I just know him from working with him from 2005 going forward. I do know when he was interviewed, what the charges are against him, the 1001 false statements to an FBI agent, that is now also in question with the 302s that may have been changed. I'd have to defer to him about the 500,000, but it's because I don't have. I'm getting feedback, Jason.
Really?
I don't have the information. I don't have enough information to give a full answer on that.
Well, let me just provide what I know, and all such information. We can't even be 100% sure that the sun came up today, but all information we're a step removed from. But I think it's fairly widely acknowledged that during the campaign and transition, he received over $500,000 through his private consulting group from the government of Turkey that he failed to report on his required sworn statements. And while he didn't plead guilty exactly to that, in the background is, what about that?
Well, let me address
I will
that.
have to look into it.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't asked him much about the case, and I'll be honest with you, because I don't want to get mixed up in it. I don't know a lot of what.
Well, I understand that, but let me also give a perception from my decades now of reporting. Quite often, as a reporter, I come across people I know personally, and I might even be friends with, and then I find out astonishing secret information about them, and I think, gee, I didn't know that. They seem like such a nice guy. I'll give one quick example. One of the biggest stories I worked with in my 14 years as a daily reporter at the Hartford Courant, there was a very charming, wealthy attorney. He was head of the state Democratic Party in Connecticut, and he was a friend of one and all, an art collector and everything. And then it turns out that he was ripping off some heiress who'd lost her marbles, and the probate judge had awarded custody of her, and she had $27 million and no heirs. And this charming attorney was keeping her virtually a prisoner to get control of the state. And this led to the first impeachment action in Connecticut history. And actually, I ran into the guy, and I'd forgotten a little bit about the case. And he greeted me warmly. I greeted him warmly. And it wasn't until later that I thought, oh my gosh, how should I act toward this guy? Because it's easier to be nice, friendly, and generous if you're stealing money on the side.
Well, let me interject, because we're getting off a little bit into the weeds of aspects that we hadn't intended to focus on, but I do want to address your concerns, Andrew, because I don't have personal knowledge of the business dealings of Michael Flynn. I don't know if what he did was legal or illegal. For all I know, he might have forgotten to tick one box on a form, and that's the whole entire problem. I'm not sure, and I'm not prepared to debate that. But what I would say is, we need to stick by the premise that people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. And right now, General Flynn has been charged with lying to federal agents during an investigation. And what we've learned during the course of that investigation is that there seem to be an alarming number of federal agents that are willing to go to any length to achieve their goal, even if that goal is against the law, in violation of the Constitution, in violation of our most basic rights. And I think that we can't really have a fair conversation if we're going to compare apples to oranges as far as, did Michael Flynn do something inappropriate relative to the FARA Act versus is he guilty of Russian collusion? I think that we would need Robert Mueller's investigation to raise those charges and lay out a credible case that Michael Flynn was involved in some wrongdoing that has a material impact on the matters that they're investigating. In my view, it seems very much like this Mueller investigation has been focused on utilizing the resources of the FBI as a weapon against anyone that was an ally of Donald Trump, irrespective of the law, irrespective of what they have or have not done. Many of the legal experts I've had on the show have indicated that if somebody went through the financial and legal paperwork and dealings of virtually any adult in the United States in business, they could find something in violation of some sort of state or federal statute that if they wanted to charge you with it, they could. So the details of what else...
That's true.
Yeah.
But Jason, one, as an investigative reporter, I look for things before government agencies file their charges.
Of course, of course.
And so I'm not totally dependent on the courthouse. And I think you, as an investigative journalist yourself, operated the same way, and so did Robyn when she was a special agent. I would just also say that, yes, in some contexts, let's give General Flynn the presumption of innocence, but I think in fairness, if that's our premise, don't we have to extend that to other people that we're accusing right now as well?
Yes, like Paul Manafort.
And well, then you also have to look at the fact that Andy McCabe failed on his financial disclosures. Not only, I don't know if he had to do the political campaign of his wife, but other just her salary, since she's not self-employed, should have been noted on on his financial disclosure. And then the thing with the Andy is, and I think you might know this, I filed the Hatch Act complaint against him.
Yeah.
I was surprised I was the only one to file that. Someone that should have been a referral from the Office of Professional Responsibility at the FBI, and that didn't happen. So I filed the Hatch Act, gave them pretty much, and I was an agent for 16 years, a supervisor and such, gave them a slam dunk case with pictures and everything like that, FOIA documents and all that. When he was fired, they stopped their Hatch Act investigation and closed it, which I think is BS, because he may have still violated this. And I'm hoping, and I have to check this out, that they gave all the information I gave to them to the Office of Inspector General, because just to say, oh, he's fired or he's not a government employee anymore doesn't change the fact that he broke the law.
Right.
And I guess I see it as any street agent. And I didn't just file it on my behalf. I filed it on behalf of a whole bunch of agents. Any street agent would have already been found guilty of that, maybe possibly fired, possibly legal restitution and such. His wife tried to say that this was just a family picture at a swim meet. I believe you can probably take a good family picture in her shirt in their backyard, not in a public place. If I were to do that and it could be found out by the FBI when I was actively an FBI agent, I'd be suspended without pay, and the OPR would go after me, but then OSC would go after me. And
No.
it's just what I'm fighting for is our leadership in these agencies need to be held accountable.
Right.
They all think they're above the law. They aren't. They need to remember who they worked for. And that's the American people. And I think a lot of the people in the higher ranks of the FBI forgot that. I've never forgotten that.
Yeah. Let me address that for a second, Robyn. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to remind everyone what the Hatch Act is and why it's so important. The FBI is expressly intended to remain non-political. We aren't appointing a Democratic FBI director or a Republican FBI director. They are supposed to be blind to these partisan issues and not involved with politics. So the filing of the Hatch Act violation by Robyn against Andrew McCabe has to do with him in his capacity as the deputy director of the FBI promoting his wife's state senatorial run. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a law enforcement agent, but my understanding would indicate that even if this was a family photo in the backyard, were it disseminated on the internet and through social media, it would still constitute Andrew McCabe utilizing his persona, his standing as the deputy director of the FBI to promote a political campaign. And shockingly, Robyn, since we've been talking, I've learned that from Scott Bennett that there's more to this. Andrew McCabe was working very hard. He was diligently working behind the scenes in a sinister manner, as he's often prone to do, to derail the campaign of Senator Dick Black, who his wife was running against. They even went to lengths to have Senator Black meet with a known terrorist in Syria so that they could frame him for that and sabotage his campaign. So when we just look at this T-shirt and say, oh, you know, that's just a family photo at a swim meet. I'm sorry, no, it's not. We are looking at a sinister arch criminal who is embedded. This is a dangerous man.
Here's another thing: is he said he had no nothing to do with his wife's campaign. He said that to the public. He said that to the Inspector General's office, I believe, and also OPR, which is 1001 lying to a federal agent. But he never, in his comments, ever addressed the supposed lunch he had with Terry McAuliffe.
Right.
Out of getting a FOIA documents, first of all, what was provided to Terry McAuliffe was Andy McCabe's official biography. You only get, you can't pull it up on the internet or anything like that. So someone had to have sent his official biography, FBI biography, to Terry McAuliffe. The meeting was actually at Terry McAuliffe's, the governor's mansion, and it was actually coffee, which started at 10. And according to Terry McAuliffe's schedule, he was to take both McCabe's with him to a Democratic conference that was going on. It turns out there was a huge conference going on that Terry McAuliffe was going to be speaking at. So, I mean, I don't know if Andy McCabe went on that whole thing, but just by going to a conference of Democrats, that he's the deputy director of the FBI. And further, there were numerous emails on his official email account pointing to Jill's run for Senate in the Virginia area. And I just, for me, I mean, I never asked anyone, like, who are you voting for? Are you a Republican or Democrat? We were always nervous about the Hatch Act.
Right.
So when the election time came around, you'd see people just like sneak out to go vote because they didn't want anyone asking them who they were voting for. But we were so careful. But for him to do all this and then lie to the public that about that he didn't participate is BS. I mean, you're right. That stuff ended up on her Twitter account, campaign Twitter account, and from what I understand, on her Facebook account, which she closed down recently.
Right.
So I know that OIG is looking at it. I'm hoping they will look at exactly what I gave to Office of Special Counsel. There's a lot of agents, analysts, professional staff out there who are embarrassed because of the shame that him and Comey and Strzok and others have brought to the FBI. And it's just, and you talk about political operatives. They were right there in that building.
Yeah.
That's the scary part to me.
Exactly. Because, these guys are very, very adept at taking a T-shirt picture and saying, oh, that's just a picture. But one of the things that I really enjoy about what we're able to do here on Crowdsource the Truth, because I'm not just having you guys for a 4-minute snippet, we can get into these conversations that really allow us to, sorry, a little problem there, that really allow us to explore the links between all these people, because it's not, as you said, just a guy standing there, doing something with his family. This is, when we really start to examine this, we see that this is a group of individuals who had an organized, coordinated plan to F Flynn and then F Trump, and we're seeing all the different players, Andrew McCabe, James Comey, Peter Strzok, all the little offshoots of what they were doing. Andrew, what do you think about this? In your career as a journalist, in your time in Washington, D.C., have we ever seen this level of corruption unfolded before the eyes of the public?
Well, in a broader sense, perhaps not. But in a narrow sense, I think the type of situations that you're describing occur and have occurred for throughout modern Washington history. Right. So it's a question of what's visible to the public. And I think the kind of situations that you describe occur vast numbers of times, most of which are unknown and unreported and increasingly difficult to report. But if you dig into history or operate as I do, knowing people from varied walks of life here in Washington, they constantly occur. And I would just say before maybe we get into solutions or a bigger picture, I'll just say that all of these agencies that surround me here have inequities and unfairness and bias and so forth. And that's exactly why I tried to foster the whistleblowers group and work with many other groups as part of our work here at the Justice Integrity Project. But I'll also say, and Jason, we've gotten to know one another, but my job is to be a pain in the neck. So I got to say, when you say about $500,000 secretly going to Michael Flynn to help the government of Turkey supposedly kidnapped someone living in the United States and delivering him to Turkey. And you say, well, we can't talk about that because he's not been charged with it. And then you describe McCabe as a sinister arch criminal when he hasn't been charged with something. I see an imbalance, and we're all entitled, of course, to our opinion. But I'll just say, as I try to be effective, I'm not particularly effective, but I try to be. Ultimately, that kind of discrepancy in standards. One is a sinister arch criminal, even though he hasn't been charged, and another, we can't possibly talk about his $500,000 because he pleaded guilty to something else. I think in the long run, that's not going to be effective.
Let me address that concern.
Are there documents that actually are sourced back to, I would say, reputable sources about the kidnapping of the U.S. person? I think that was the person up in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
I had heard about that person when I was still in the FBI, so
Something
I
with
knew
the
exactly
Gulen schools,
well,
right?
Gulen. It's Gulen.
Gulen himself. So let me take a step back, Robyn. Sorry to interrupt.
But I want to understand that. I want to understand about the kidnapping. I know there's a lot of either rumor and conjecture out there about that. I talked to friends of Mike, and were like, he never would have done that. And but I still need to look into I still always look.
Let me just pause you guys. Let me pause you guys for a second, because what I meant to convey, Andrew, was not that we can't talk about it, but that I'm personally not prepared to talk about it because I don't know the facts of it. I know a lot more about what's going on with Andrew McCabe, and in part due to my conversations with Robyn. I would also point out that that General Flynn was not acting in a capacity as a federal law enforcement agent. Moreover, he wasn't the deputy director of the entire Federal Bureau of Investigation. So it's not a simple matter of, well, this guy's been accused of this and this guy hasn't been accused of that. I think there's a fundamental problem with the FBI as it ran under James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Robert Mueller. I think what we're seeing as we zoom out on this picture is a culture of corruption, this white male hierarchy that has a stranglehold on the top. And when people like Robyn Gritz, when people like Michael Dick, when people like Michael McMahon pop their heads up to say, hey, something's wrong, their heads get chopped off. Now, for all I know, having not looked into the facts and details of this matter that you raise about Michael Flynn, I know that Fethullah Gulen is, by some people's standards, a terrorist who is attempting to subvert the United States by having these schools around the place. So for all I know, the FBI, the CIA, the DIA might have said, Mike Flynn, your job is to get this guy out of here and send him to Turkey. And from what I know about the FBI and how they've operated, they have a tendency to set up these operations so that if on Monday they like you and on Tuesday they're pissed off, they can say, oh, you did something illegal. They don't tell you that they told you to do it and forced you to do it. So I'm just not prepared to talk about it because I don't know enough about it. You raise a fair point, and I'd like to learn more about it. And perhaps we can have another show and discuss it, because I think you do know more about it than I. And
than I as well.
Yes, and so perhaps Robyn and I can learn something from you on that. In the last few minutes, I just want to circle back, Andrew, because I know you've done a lot of great writing, and you and I have had many conversations about the JFK assassination, and of course, we can't talk about that topic without talking about J. Edgar Hoover, who is in competition for the most corrupt FBI director in history. We'll have to see by 2019 if he remains that. What can you say, Andrew, about what seems to be a really problematic culture of corruption in the leadership at the FBI?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Actually, my main talk among a couple that I gave at the Whistleblower Summit was about the breakthrough stories in the Washington Post, published after 50 years, two separate stories, Sunday front page in depth, in which related to the assassinations 50 years ago of Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And in both stories, an experienced Washington Post reporter, Tom Jackman, reported that the families did not believe the official version of the assassinations. And this was backed up in great depth, including with scientific evidence. And while the main investigations were local police departments, and in King's case in Memphis, Tennessee, where he died, and in Los Angeles, where Kennedy was killed, the local police departments have a heavy FBI and other counterterrorism presence in these kinds of investigations. And I've been deeply involved in getting at the truth of these assassinations, which I now believe, after considerable study, involve patsies in both cases, Sirhan and James Earl Ray. And so that's what my talk this week was about. And it's by no means a love letter to the FBI or the other authorities. So, and it goes in somewhat juxtaposition or counterpoint to some of my earlier comments on this show. And it's the bottom line is that we have to look at each case in depth, skeptically with the looking skeptically at the FBI and the rest of the Justice Department, but also skeptically at other players involved.
Absolutely. And, you know, just in closing, before we wrap it out for the day, I want to bring Robyn back in and let's talk about how you guys can work together and how people watching can help move forward this idea of real, meaningful whistleblower protection.
Yeah,
Well,
I was looking forward to that. The solutions.
Yes. Please, Robyn.
Oh no, I'm looking at in the camera.
Oh, Andrew.
Because you have my solutions that I've done, other people may not, think it's effective or anything. And I wanted to hear what your opinion was in what we could do better to bring about education and solutions in the whistleblower issue. What you feel.
Well, here's two things. One, listen to your story and crowdsource the truth. Radio is a great example. Let me squeeze in my visit to Congress concept that may save you some money, Robyn, and be effective for others in saving the money. And I'll try to keep it to 22 and a half seconds here or something. But one is, as a longtime advocate in Washington, I used to run a global business trade association for many years. First, for the ordinary initial contact, I don't think people need to go to Washington. Go to the district office of your member of Congress or your senator and start with the staff. No matter how big your problem is, it starts, or your whistleblowing or issue, it starts with the staff, not the U.S. senator. Mm-hmm. So go there and set up communications and leave time for discussion, not just making your points, and get to know them and work your way up. Now, I'm probably at my 22-second limit, but that's the effective way to do it based on my experience. Now, let me put your successful experience, Robyn, into that context. If I have a couple of other moments. One of the things that you did successfully was you went beyond my generic advice in a way that was useful and practical. And you said, look, there's a famous person here, Andrew McCabe. There's a hot issue. Let me take it to the top. And that works in some cases, but not in most. But it did work for you and it can work for others. So that's a quick overview.
Well, see, with Andy McCabe, he was the one that authorized all the retaliation against me within 5 days of my filing the EEO complaint. So I do have that difference in my case that does put it in the spotlight a little bit more. And it shows that, my case is a good example of how vindictive he is. So it's something that a lot of people, people were calling me all the time about. So I was like, okay, I guess that's what you want to talk about. I was very happy to be on the Ingram angle one night and just talk about terrorism. She wanted me on there for my expertise in terrorism and not my case. That felt good. The other thing is, I was recently named as a senior fellow to the London Center for Policy Research, and have been speaking with them quite a bit, and maybe able to use my position there also as well to get some inroads. And I'll be going to an awards ceremony in New York with them in September, but just to at least get the story out there. Some people who are active employees, it's tough because they can't speak to the press. But I suggested to someone just last night, that's what I did in Pennsylvania, is I went right to the office and started talking to them and telling them what was going on, and gave them exactly, can you ask about this? Can you see if you can help me in any way? And they were more than willing to. But the senator wasn't that great, but at least I took that chance. And that I totally agree with that. I want to find a way, though, to, if I do go to Washington, D.C., to meet with several different key individuals on the Hill. How would I go about doing that?
Well, you could probably do it because of the intense political interest and your kind of expertise. One thing I left out is those who have had high positions in law enforcement, as you have, often get an entree. A friend of mine, Carl Golovin, who was a responder at 9/11, also a whistleblower on it, he's achieved great success in leveraging those two elements. So I think you'd probably have very good luck in Washington. I would again suggest working in Chicago. And by the way, as you may listeners and you may know from my accent, I'm a native of Chicago. I'm also on the board of what's called the Illinois State Society, which is Illinois people in Washington. This year celebrating 200 years of statehood with a number of events that we've put on. And Robyn, I would love to meet you on your time in Washington. And
absolutely.
In fact, even in advance, let's correspond on these issues and
Yes.
And try to help get your story out further. By the way, I'm a whistleblower myself in the news and legal profession, and one of the elements of what I was talking about at this conference was how to keep balance and ultimately prevail. So I'm very sympathetic and look forward to getting these stories out.
Yeah, and you just said something so key, and that's a guest of Jason had on, Michael Dick, who's from the FBI. Thank goodness I knew him, because he told me how to keep my balance, how to give it a couple hours a day or an hour and then just leave it. And don't take any calls after 8 o'clock on your case so you can sleep. I mean, he gave me like these little things that were helpful, because it turns your world upside down, and you know that.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad I was able to bring you guys together. And I mean, even in this short closing statement, we can see how just moving the ball forward is not something that Robyn can necessarily do by herself. Of course, being a retired special agent, having the circumstance that she does, having been particularly targeted by Andrew McCabe, who now is in the crosshairs because of this just amazing conflagration of huge, unthinkable corruption. In many ways, this could be the perfect storm where Robyn is that little boat bobbing around in the water, and she needs our support. I really want to encourage people to go to GoFundMe and search for Robyn Gritz. I'm going to paste the URL directly into the comments, but keep in mind that even making a trip to Washington, D.C., booking a plane ticket and a hotel room for just a couple of days is prohibitively expensive for someone who has been kicked out of their job and subjected to the various tactics that the FBI and other agencies use to prevent people from getting gainful employment. This is part of the slow kill that they do at affecting your mental health, affecting your financial health. If they can't straight out kill you or put you in jail, they can do these things. And the best way for us as people, as citizens of the United States, to fight that corruption is to work with whistleblowers like Robyn and facilitators of that, like Andrew. And I hope that people will participate in these events and help Robyn financially on her GoFundMe page. Of course, people can purchase presidential puppetry from Amazon.com or perhaps another retailer that's not controlled by the CIA. I want to thank you both for joining me this morning. It's been a really fascinating conversation, and certainly now that you guys are in touch in Washington, D.C., I'd love to come and meet you both there. Perhaps we could do another interview, talk about some of these issues that you've raised, Andrew. I'd love to know what was going on with Turkey, and perhaps there's information there that we need to learn about.
Great.
And I want to thank everybody for watching. Going to be back later tonight at 6:30 with Quinn Michaels, only on Patreon. So I hope that people will go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become sponsors of the show. For just $1 a month, you can enjoy exclusive content like this evening's show with Quinn Michaels, Robyn Gritz, Andrew Kreig. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you both soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.